coverage more affordable for all Americans. Thank you, Mr. President. I would yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
And would ask consent that I be allowed to speak as if in morning business for up to 15 minutes.
Without objection.
I'm here today to share a new and stunning revelation unearthed by my staff on the Senate Budget Committee. Part of my responsibilities as the ranking member is to look at the long-term cost of legislation. So we wanted to ascertain the long-term cost of the President's health care bill. And I mean the kind of long-term cost analysis that's been going on for a number of years with regard to Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, over a 75-year period. I was floored by what we discovered. But first, let's put a little context. President Obama told the American people repeatedly that his health care bill would cost $900 billion over 10 years and that it would not add one dime to the public debt. But we have shown that the cost score for the first 10 years of implementation, when the bill is fully implemented, is actually $2.6 trillion, almost 3 times as much. In addition, the offsets used to reduce the law's official cost were enormous and phony, and as I have discussed before and will detail again in another time, these are unacceptable offsets. So you've heard this cat's story of Mr. Mustapha, the Napoleon of crime. I say this bill is a Napoleon of criminal offsets. The more we learn about the bill, the more we discover that it's even more unaffordable than was suspected. So over a period of about 3 months, our staff has worked diligently to estimate the new unfunded liabilities that would be imposed by the passage of this legislation. This is not the total cost of the bill, but the unfunded mandatory coverage obligations incurred by the United States government on behalf of the United States people over a period of time. An unfunded obligation is basically the amount of money we have to spend on a mandatory expense that does not have a funding source, that we don't have the money to meet. It's money we don't have, but money we're committed to spend. It's this kind of long-term, unfunded obligations that have placed this nation's financial situation at such great risk. It's a thing that's called witness after witness after witness before the Budget Committee, of which I'm ranking member, that tells us we're on an unsustainable path. That means money we will either have to print, borrow, or tax to meet the obligations we would occur as a people as a result of the passage of this bill. For instance, it is widely agreed that Social Security has an unfunded liability of $7 trillion over 75 years. That's an enormous sum. It's double the entire amount of the United States budget today. So my staff used the models that are used by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. They've talked with these individual experts about these numbers and worked diligently to come up with a figure using appropriate methods. That figure, using the administration's own optimistic assumptions and claims about the cost of the law, is an incredible $17 trillion that would be added to the unfunded liabilities of the United States over the next 75 years. That is more than twice the unfunded liability of Social Security. Now, I want to emphasize, this $17 trillion figure is not an estimate based on what we think the bill will really cost if all the administration's claims and promises were to be proven false. And certainly there have been matters proven false already, but we use the administration's own figures. So the unfunded liability is almost certainly not going to be less than $17 trillion, but if any more of the administration's claims unravel, as so many already have, the cost of the program's unpaid obligation will rise radically higher than $17 trillion. For instance, the former CBO director, Douglas Holtz-Aiken, an expert widely respected in these matters, said that millions of more individuals may lose their current employer coverage and be placed into the government-supported exchanges than we had currently projected, than the administration has projected. I didn't follow Mr. Holtz-Aiken's arguments or his concerns. We took the administration's assumptions. So let me briefly explain some of what now comprises this additional $17 trillion in unfunded obligations. $12 trillion is for the health care law premium subsidy program. You see, the law created new regulations that drive up the price of insurance for millions of Americans. The writers of the law knew it would inflate the cost of insurance premiums to do so. So to cover that cost, they had to include new government subsidies so people could pay for their more expensive insurance. On Medicaid, onto the Medicaid, this new health care law has added another $5 trillion to its unfunded liabilities. This is on top of the substantial unfunded obligations that the federal and state governments have already had to take on in order to support Medicaid. And they have protested vigorously to us, warning of these additional deep expenditure requirements that are falling on the states. And these figures don't even account for the dozens of new bureaucracies that will be created to implement the President's health care law or the expansion of the bureaucracies. Those costs are not included in the $17 trillion or the cost estimates that the administration has used for the bill. For instance, the IRS has requested 4,000 new IRS agents and $300 million in additional funds for their part in implementing the new law. At a time when we should be trying, we have to shore up programs that are threatened by default, Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid. This health care law adds an entirely new obligation, one we cannot pay for, and puts the entire financing of the United States government in jeopardy. We don't have the money. We don't have another $17 trillion in unfunded liabilities that we can add to our account. We've got to reduce the ones that we have. This has been obvious for a decade, several decades. People have talked about it repeatedly. Instead of doing something about those programs that are headed to bankruptcy, we add, under this President's determined insistence on a straight party line vote, one of the largest unfunded mandates in history on top of what we already have. How can we possibly justify this? It cannot be justified. This bill has to be removed from the books because we don't have the money. There are a lot of other reasons, but that's one of them. It's inescapable. It would be absolutely irresponsible for this Congress to maintain a law that would run up this kind of debt, 2.5 times the unfunded obligations of Social Security, and we're worried about our children being able to have their Social Security checks on time? This is not a little bitty matter. It's important. So I'll be sending a letter to the GAO, the Government Accountability Office. They do these kind of scorings over 75 years, and we're going to ask them to construct their independent estimate of the unfunded health care law obligations. I believe they'll be similar to the ones my staff has produced. I hope they're better, but I'm afraid they're not. And even if they come close to what we've calculated, it's pretty clear that the money that will be coming in could be far less, and the obligations could be far more than are being projected, as Mr. Holtz-Aiken and others have said. So it's an urgent matter. I plan to come to the floor in coming days to continue to explain the true fiscal cost facts about this legislation. And there are many other serious problems with it. The bill is unpopular, it's unaffordable, it's unconstitutional, it's got to be repealed. I thank the Chair and would yield the floor.
Madam President.
The Senator from Delaware.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'd ask unanimous consent to speak as in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. I feel compelled to say a word or two on the heels of our colleague from Alabama, who I salute as he heads off into the sinking, the setting sun. But I wish you well. Have a good break. But I want to say, when I was in the Navy back during the Vietnam War, when we weren't flying a lot of missions off the coast of Cambodia and Vietnam, we flew a lot of missions in and out of other countries, including Japan. And I've always had an interest in Japan in terms of the way they provide health care. And one of the things that's intriguing to me about Japan and the way they provide health care is they spend half as much money for health care as we do. They spend 8% of gross domestic product. We spend 16% of gross domestic product. They get better outcomes, everything from longer life expectancy to lower rates of infant mortality. And they cover everybody. They cover everybody. It's not socialized medicine. They have private health care delivery system and private health insurance companies as well as we do. But they get a better result for about half the money that we do. And we have to compete with them. And it's not a fair competition. We have our businesses that are competing directly with the Japanese and, frankly, with other countries as well. But when they're spending half as much money for health care and we're trying to compete our businesses against theirs, it's not a fair fight. It's a little bit like having one arm tied behind our backs. For years, presidents, members of Congress, Democrat and Republican, have talked about this challenge, the fact that we spend so much more money for health care with a lot of the rest of the world, and we don't get better results. In a lot of cases, we get worse results, and we don't cover everybody. We have a lot of people that go uncovered. That's not very smart. But for years, for decades, nobody really took it on in a serious way. They tried to in the Clinton administration and sort of kind of gave up during that course. And, didn't have the kind of bipartisan support you need. And frankly, we didn't have the kind of bipartisan support I would like to have had on health care reform when we took it up during the earlier part of this current administration. A lot of people are focused on the individual mandate as a constitutional, as an unconstitutional. What do I know? I'm not a lawyer. I mean, I don't pretend to be an expert on that stuff. I studied a little economics when I was a Navy ROTC midshipman at Ohio State, and when I got out of the Navy and moved to Delaware to get an MBA on the GI Bill, I studied some more economics and all, but I don't pretend to be a lawyer. But I do know this. Health insurance companies have told all of us, Democrat, Republican, presidents now and in the past, they've said, look, if you expect us to provide health insurance for folks with pre-existing conditions, you've got to make sure that the pool of people that we have to cover includes not just people that have pre-existing conditions, not just people that are sick or have illnesses or conditions that are expensive to treat. You've got to make sure that we have a pool of people to ensure that includes some healthy people. And some countries, the way they deal with this is they mandate for everybody to have coverage. We didn't want to do that. We didn't want to mandate that people have to have coverage, but we wanted to incentivize people, including healthier people, including healthier young people like the ages of my sons who are in their early 20s, to make sure that they end up in that pool, or at least some of those young men and women end up in that pool. And some healthy people end up in that pool. But part of the request from the health insurance industry in return for doing away with pre-existing conditions and basically screening out people who are sick and saying, oh, we're not going to provide coverage for you, was to make sure that a lot of healthier people are going to end up being in that health insurance pool. The way we decided to do it in the health care bill and law is rather than just mandate that people have to get coverage, say we want to incentivize you, and if you choose not to, that's your business. If you happen to be very poor, we're going to provide financial assistance to help you to pay down your cost for health care. But if you're not poor, and you have the financial means, we'd like for you to go ahead and get coverage. We're not going to mandate it, But the first year that you have means to be able to have coverage and you choose not to, there'll be a fine or penalty of some kind, maybe a couple of $100, and that'll increase for several years, not to $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000, but it'll go up several $100s in order to encourage people to get the coverage. At the end of the day, some people will say, you know, I'm paying $600 or whatever it ends up being. Maybe I should just go ahead and get, instead of paying this penalty, this fee, why don't I just go ahead and get health insurance coverage? And the idea is to provide some plans that are reasonably cost affordable for folks to take advantage of. But so that's the issue of the mandate. And the Supreme Court will decide whether or not under the Commerce Clause, the Constitution, whether or not just as well, we compel people under the law to pay into Social Security, can there be a similar kind of compunction to say, you know, we'd like for people to get covered for health care, but in this case not to mandate it like we do with Social Security. So we'll see how it works out with the Supreme Court. They've heard the arguments this week, and I'm sure the arguments will continue on the airways and in town hall meetings and on television in the months to come, and maybe beyond that, who knows. But the heart and soul of health care reform legislation has less to do with mandates, for me, than it does with how do we get better health care outcomes for less money. For me, that's the key. How do we get better health care outcomes for less money? And we don't have to look to Japan or other countries to figure that out. We have to look at places like Minnesota, Mayo Clinic, Ohio, Cleveland Clinic, Pennsylvania, healthcare delivery system called Geisinger-Bigwin, Utah, Intermountain Health, California, Kaiser Permanente. And what do they have in common? They get better healthcare outcomes for millions of people, tens of millions of people, for less money than most other healthcare delivery systems in this country. Better results for less money. How do they do it? Well, they have figured out what works, and they do more of that. And they figured out what doesn't work to get better healthcare outcomes for less money. They do less of that. And one of the things that they have done, they've moved away from what we call a fee-for-service approach to healthcare. You know, people get sick, all right, they go see a doctor, they go see a nurse, and they have visits, they get shots, or they get lab tests, they have lab tests done, or they get x-rays or MRIs, and we treat people when they get sick. That's the way, for years, the way we've done health care delivery in this country, including in Medicare and Medicaid. Much smarter ideas come out of Cleveland Clinic, huge health care delivery system in northern Ohio, Mayo Clinic, Geisinger, Pennsylvania, Intermountain Health, Utah, Kaiser Permanente, mostly in California. Here's what they do. They don't just incentivize health care providers, doctors, nurses, hospitals, to work on people when they're sick. Their incentive works entirely different. And what they do in those places is they focus on how do we keep people healthy? How do we provide the incentives, not just to the doctors, hospitals, and nurses, to keep people healthy, but how do we incentivize the patient, the person whose health is at stake here? How do we incentivize them to be part of, take personal responsibility for their own health care? In my mind, Madam President, that is the heart and soul of health care reform, right there. And among the smart things that work are large purchasing pools. We got an 8 million person purchasing pool for us that we're part of. Members of Congress, our staffs, all federal employees, federal retirees, our dependents are part of a huge purchasing pool called the Federal Employee Health Benefit Plan. It's like 8 million people. We don't have 8 million federal employees, but we have 8 million people when you add in retirees and dependents and so forth. We're part of this big health purchasing pool, and we get lower prices, not free. We pay about 28% of the cost of our premiums as federal employees, as servants, if you will, that are people of our respective states. And our employers, taxpayers, pay the other 72% or so. But what we're going to do is provide the opportunity for individuals, for families, for businesses, small and mid-sized businesses all over the country in less than 24 months to be able to join a similar kind of purchasing pool. We're going to start them up in every state. New Hampshire, Delaware, Alabama, every other state will have the opportunity to have their own purchasing pool, large purchasing pool, to be able to take advantage of low administrative costs. Our administrative costs for our Federal Employee Health Benefit Plan, $3 out of every $100 for the cost of premium. $3 out of every $100 of premium cost goes for administration. You compare that to most plans for individuals or families or small businesses, it's more like 20% or 30%, 3%, large purchasing pool. We're going to have those available in fact, in every state. The other thing that we have going for us in Federal Employee Health Benefit Plan, every health insurance, and we use private health insurance plans. It's not stuff that, we're not using socialized medicine or stuff like that. It's, all the private health insurance plans in the country can sign up and say, we want to be able to offer our plans to the folks that are federal employees, dependents, federal retirees, and we can choose from among them. So there's a lot of competition between those health insurance companies, and we get to benefit from that. The competition drives down cost. Competition can help drive down cost, improve the range of opportunities. The other thing that I like, Madam President, about the law, insurance for the most part can't be sold across state lines, but we make an exception here. And I'll use Delaware as an example. We're bounded on the west by Maryland, to the north by Pennsylvania, to the east by New Jersey. And when we established our own health insurance pool in 2014, we got about 900,000 people, but we're not going to have a huge health insurance pool. We're sure not going to have 8 million people in it. But what we have under the law is the opportunity to create an interstate compact between Delaware and Maryland, or Delaware and Pennsylvania, or Delaware and New Jersey, and have a multi-state, or maybe all the above. Have a multi-state purchasing pool or exchange. And the great thing about this approach is we, one, have a bigger pool, drive down administrative costs, increase the competition in the health care plans that are offered. And health care that would be available in Delaware could be offered in, plans could be offered in Maryland, could be offered in Pennsylvania, could be offered in New Jersey. So you have a larger purchasing pool, more competition, I think a better deal for consumers. I think that is another part of the heart and soul. So two things I'll close with on this slide, and I'll turn to what I really came to the floor to talk about, before I was inspired by my friend from Alabama. In terms of the key reforms in the health care legislation, number one, move away from fee-for-service. Just paying for, treating people when they're sick. Migrate away from that. We still need to treat people when they're sick, but migrate to a system like we have at Mayo, Cleveland Clinic, Geisinger, Intermountain Health, Kaiser Permanente, where they actually focus on how do we keep people well. Focus on prevention, focus on wellness, focus on treating people in a coordinated fashion as a team, not as individual providers over here. I think it's a much smarter. And the other key, I think, element here is this idea of creating these large purchasing pools and trying to incentivize people to be part of the healthcare delivery system by taking better care of themselves. So those are the two keys. Now, what I really came to the floor today for, Madam President, is have this drink of water. And to switch gears and to talk a little bit about gas prices. Madam President, I don't know what kind of vehicle you drive most of your miles in New Hampshire. Most of the miles I drive and been driving in Delaware for now 11 years is in a Chrysler Town & Country minivan. When I stepped down as governor in January of 2001, my old Chevrolet Corsica, it's about 12, 13 years old, and my wife said, don't you think it's time to maybe get something new? And I took my oldest son, Christopher, who was about, 12 at the time, and I said, let's go out and shop for new cars. And it'll be a man thing, and dad and son. And so we went out and we drove Porsches, we drove Ferraris, and we bought a 2001 Chrysler Town & Country minivan, which he laments to this day. But anyway, fast forward 11 years forward, and we had a meeting yesterday morning, as you know, with the CEO of Chrysler Fiat, and I mentioned it at our meeting here in the Capitol that we had bought this vehicle when I stepped down as governor, and 11 years later, later this week, the odometer, you look at the odometer, how many miles are on it, it will have the numbers 3,000,000 and counting, over 300,000 miles. We're going to go over 300,000 miles. Built to last. What a great car, built in this country, terrific vehicle. But when I stopped and got gas last week, and we paid about $3.81, and the prices continued to go up and up, mostly up, sometimes down and back up again. And what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about high gas prices and how it puts pressure on all budgets, including the budget of my own family. We drive a lot. We drive that vehicle a whole lot, and hopefully we'll drive it a few more miles before it's ready to sit more in the driveway and take a rest. So I want to begin by acknowledging, Madam President, that I go home just about every night, talk to people literally almost every day, morning or evening in Delaware, and cover the state this weekend and for the next week or two during our recess. So I hear a whole lot directly from my folks that I'm privileged to represent about concerns about gas prices, gasoline prices at the pump, and the kind of pressure it puts on their budgets within their own families. I understand that gas prices are at their peak. Actually, they've been higher than this. I think they're a little over $4 during the part of the Bush administration, but this is as high as they've been for some time. It puts a strain on American families, puts a strain on American business, and threatens to impede or slow down our economic recovery, which is actually moving at a pace pretty well. Unfortunately, the solution is not as simple as some would suggest. If it were, we would not be having this discussion every year or two around the same time. And I'm asked sometimes, why don't we just drill more in this country? Because some assume that high gas prices at the pump must mean that we have slowed down or stopped drilling here at home. And many are surprised by the answer. And the answer is this: we are drilling more in America. In fact, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Madam President, but we're drilling more in this country than we have for at least the last 8 years. And because we are drilling more, the U.S. is now a net oil exporter, not a net oil importer. And the country this country, which for years we said we're the Saudi Arabia of coal, we're now on our way to becoming the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. And as we have opened up for drilling additional acres onshore, offshore, off Alaska, in the Gulf, we're in a position to become a net oil exporter. Now, the administration, the Obama administration, has made available millions of acres for oil and gas exploration in the last year or two, approving more than 400 drilling permits since the new safety standards were put in place. And these safety standards, you may recall, were implemented to make sure we didn't have a repeat oil spill disaster like the BP oil spill that occurred almost 2 years ago from today. And we've been joined here on the floor by Senator Nelson from Florida, who remembers all too well the oil that washed up in places like Pensacola, where I went and did some basic training on my way to become a naval flight officer, and kind of headaches that they. But since we got that straightened out, puts in place tighter restrictions for drilling safeguards, 400 or so new drilling permits just since then have been put in place with stronger safety standards. As a result, we have a record number of oil rigs operating right now, more working oil and gas rigs than the rest of the world combined. Let me just say that again. With the changes that have been made, the increase in permitting in the last year or two, we now have a record number of oil rigs operating right now, more working oil and gas rigs than the rest of the world combined. And yet, of the millions of acres the government has allowed, our government has allowed for oil and gas development, only 25% of those acres are being used for production. We had a chart here that demonstrates that rather graphically. If you will, think of all this as the millions of acres that are available for oil and gas development in this country. Of all these, in the orange, we have the percentage that are producing acres. We actually have permits where the oil and gas companies could be drilling. 25% of these are producing acres, and 75% of these are non-producing acres. It's not because people are drilling and coming up with dry holes. It's in many cases they're not drilling. In many cases, they're not drilling. Keep that picture in mind. You know the old saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words? This is worth at least 500, maybe even more than that.
Would the senator yield for that point?
Happy to yield.
Would you believe that in the Gulf of Mexico, of all the production there, that the percentage is even worse in all of those acres that are under lease, which are 32 million acres.
Just in the Gulf?
Just in the Gulf, 32 million acres. And guess how many acres are actually drilled and producing?
8 million.
6 million.
Really?
6. So 26 million acres are under lease in the Gulf of Mexico and are not being produced.
Oh, thank you for that.
Wouldn't it suggest that they ought to use it or lose it?
Yeah. It certainly would. Well, that's not a bad, thank you for sharing that point with us. So here we are, more drilling in America, onshore and offshore. We're no longer a net oil importer. We have 75 million acres that are leased and have yet to be tapped. And a lot of those are down in the Gulf, as Senator Nelson suggests. Yet American consumers are still paying more at the pump. All the while, the 5 largest oil companies, BP, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch Shell Group, made last year, they did pretty well. They made about $137 billion last year. And to top it off, these companies receive billions of dollars in taxpayer subsidies to drill for oil and gas, even as they're making very healthy, I think record-breaking profits. Now, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and but let me just stop before I go into I want to be clear on this one. I don't think any of us should begrudge the oil and gas companies their success. They have a fair amount of risk when they drill for oil or for gas, and it's not this is a business without risk. But this is also a business with enormous payoffs, enormous reward for assuming those risks. But I do question giving away billions of taxpayer dollars in drilling subsidies at a time when we're running record federal deficits to establish and successful industries that I don't think need a whole lot of financial incentive to drill more in this country. If you can make $100 a barrel or $110 a barrel or so forth, that's pretty good incentive, at least in my mind. Well, why because at the end of this day this is not the solution. Well, we can't just drill our way out of the situation that we're in. I'm told that today America consumes some 19.5 million barrels of oil every day, and the primary reason that amount is so high is because Americans have very little choice at the pump. And until recently, we had very little choice in the showroom, the automotive showrooms. That's changed rather dramatically in 5 years, and it's going to change a whole lot more. But we can choose between oil and oil. And most of the time when we pull into a gas station to fill up. Basically, every American driver's dollars are a foregone conclusion to the oil industry. So what do we need? What do we need to do about this? Well, how about some choice? Maybe we can give Americans a choice. And the chart we have here, we have a solar. Some of the new vehicles that are actually being made actually have solar panels, believe it or not, on the roofs. Here we have wind, and we're harnessing a lot of wind around the country. Hopefully, before long, we'll harness it off the East Coast, maybe from North Carolina up to Maine to provide electricity. It'll help provide the juice that they need for these hybrid electric vehicles that are being made by more and more. We have nuclear. We have a lot of nuclear in the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast that can provide electricity, if you will, the juice for those hybrid electric vehicles. And here we have companies like DuPont in our state. They're working with BP to actually create not corn ethanol, but ethanol, cellulosic ethanol, out of what I call corn stovers. What is a corn stover? That's the stalk, that's the corn cobs, that's the leaf of the corns, and really create a fuel like something called biobutanol that we'll hear more about in the years to come that has better energy density than corn ethanol. It mixes better with gasoline than corn ethanol. It actually travels through pipelines. Corn ethanol doesn't do that. It's like all the things that corn ethanol is not. That's the kind of stuff we ought to be doing. And we need to be incentivizing, not only having been involved in the R&D of that stuff, but also be encouraging its being used. And I think market forces will take it from there. But whether the choice is natural gas, converting large diesel vehicles into using natural gas, electricity from clean energy or biofuels, or just making nuclear. We just, for the first time in 30 years, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has just approved the construction of 2 new nuclear power plants. We went 30 years without building a new nuclear power plant. 2 are underway right now down in Georgia. They use a new design called AP1000, also just approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And the new design is one that literally shuts down a plant. Shuts down a nuclear plant. If you have a hurricane, or if you have an earthquake, or you have a tsunami, basically it shuts itself down. We don't have to worry about the problems they had in Fukushima, where they lost communications, where they lost the pumping systems, where all this and that happened. Everything that went wrong could go wrong. These systems under the AP1000 basically shut down by themselves. It's a much smarter approach. And it's the way the 2 new power plants in Georgia are going to be built. That's part of the solution as well. But we need investments in new fuels and investments in new vehicles and new infrastructure to use these new American-made alternative fuels. We already have vehicles that can run on biofuels, on natural gas, on electricity. We had the folks from the U.S. Navy in the other day, including some people from down in Florida, and we're flying Navy airplanes, Air Force airplanes, using like a 50-50 mix of jet fuel and a biofuel. Pretty cool stuff. And with no degradation in performance. We just need to make those vehicles, whether they're aircraft or cars, trucks, and vans, make those vehicles and the fuels for those vehicles more available to the American people, in this case, to our armed forces. We just need a choice. We need a greater choice than what we've had. And the bill offered by Senator Mendez actually starts to give us that choice. I'm getting close to the end here, Senator Nelson, so we just say instead of giving billions of dollars to oil companies to continue what they're already doing, why don't we just put some federal dollars in to work to allow real choices at the pump? And it turns out that some of the folks that are doing some really cutting-edge work in this turn out to be some of these oil companies. Some of the best biofuels work is being done by, I think, outfits like BP and like Shell. And rather than incentivize them just to drill more, why don't we incentivize them to come up with alternative and biofuels and other kinds of renewable forms of energy? They shouldn't be cut out of that. They're energy companies. They're not just oil and gas companies. Let's incentivize them to create energy. I want to, if I can, just go back to a couple of years. I want to go back to 2002. 2002, I'm told that, oh gosh, from 2002 to 2010, Chevron spent something like roughly $4.5 billion globally. From 2002 2010, they did on research and development for renewables and alternatives, including geothermal, biofuels, advanced batteries, wind and solar, as well as on energy-efficient measures. That's about $4.4 billion. In 2010 alone, ExxonMobil invested about $67 million in research and development in oil alternatives, mainly in algae research. That same year, BP spent $284 million. ConocoPhillips spent something like $34 million on research, development, and demonstrations in alternative fuels. Again, the idea is these oil companies, they're doing R&D. And why don't we incentivize them to do some R&D for renewable fuels, not for oil and gas? When they have oil and gas, you know, $100 a barrel, $90 a barrel, they don't need a whole lot in terms of incentives to drill. Let's incentivize them to do the renewable fuels. Okay. Rather than, I want to be mindful of our time and be mindful of my colleague waiting here. Let's just, in closing, let's say, let's put federal dollars into choices at the pump that are developed here in America. I'll say that again. We're taking money from the Treasury. We're using that money to incentivize the creation of more energy, in some cases more fuel, rather than just incentivizing creation of a traditional fuel, if you will, that comes out of the ground, the oil. Why don't we incentivize some of those same oil companies and a bunch of folks that aren't oil companies to create renewable fuels, kind of I just mentioned, that will be produced here in America, that will help us lower our costs and create jobs while they're doing it. If we want an apple today, when is the best time to plant a tree? The best time to plant a tree is probably 10 years ago. Perhaps 6 years ago if you really nurture and care for that tree. Well, that's what we're dealing with here today. We need to start investing today for the choices and lower utility costs at the pump tomorrow. Just like building the Keystone Pipeline, which is supported by some, opposed by others. The southern part of that is actually underway. The rest is going to be going through an approval process. It should be worked out within the next year. That's not going to solve the price of the pump today. What we need is what we call all-the-above approach. All-the-above approach. It includes nuclear, includes offshore wind, onshore wind, includes biofuels, includes solar, and includes natural gas and big diesel vehicles that we transform to take natural gas. All the above. And that's what we need to do. We need to nurture new investments for alternative fuels so we can see the economic gains sooner rather than later. I think Senator Menendez's legislation does that. That's why I'm calling on my colleagues to support that kind of approach, whether it's this particular approach or something that's similar to that. And that pretty much wraps up what I want to say. I want to thank my friend from Florida for being a voice of reason on these subjects. This is a guy who's really good at just using some common sense. I'll close with this. My dad was a naval flight officer, not a naval flight, he was a naval chief petty officer for many years, for 30-some years. He used to say to my sister and me, Bill, he used to say, just use some common sense. We must not have had much as kids because he sure said it a lot. But I think the common sense approach here is an all-the-above approach. We need to do all the above. And we need to incentivize the oil companies and a lot of other folks, not just to drill for oil, but actually to make sure there's some good alternatives to that. With that having been said, I yield to my friend and colleague and bid you adieu. Thank you.
Madam President.
Senator from Florida.
Madam President, I came to the floor to talk about an outstanding citizen in our state, but before I do, while my colleague is here, I just want to thank him for a very well-reasoned statement. What we need is overall income tax code reform. My colleague from Delaware and I have the privilege of sitting on the Finance Committee, and even though the prospects for tax code reform are very slim between now and the election, perhaps shortly thereafter, we can really get about the seriousness of tax code, making it more fair, more simple, taking revenue that otherwise escapes the Treasury because it goes into all these tax preferences called tax expenditures, tax loopholes, and use that revenue to simplify the tax code and to lower everybody's rates, including the individual rates and the corporate rates. Now, that's eminently common sense, and the reason I want to point this out right now is because our friend from Delaware has just pointed out one of those loopholes. In an industry that is certainly not hurting because the 5 top oil companies in the last quarter, that's 90 days, had profit, not revenue, the 5 top north of $25 billion. For 5 companies, for 90 days, not revenue, profit. Now, we don't begrudge them the profit. But should there be these tax preferences that have been etched into the tax code over a century that, in fact, allow this industry to have tax preferences, or in other words, deductions of $4 billion a year? Now, I would think that that would be a place that we could start on tax preferences. You're obviously not going to get it in the context of the politics of an election, and you're not going to get it in an isolated thing. We're going to have to look at the overall tax code and start making it more fair for the American taxpayer. I dare say that there's not very many American taxpayers who think that the IRS tax code is a fair code.
Or simple.
Or simple. And as a result, I want to thank him for his elucidation of what is a place that we could start. And it's not right or left, it's not R or D, it's common sense. One other thing that I would add to the Senator's excellent presentation, and that is that as gas creeps higher and higher, and in parts of Florida it is now $4 a gallon, and that oil is being sold on the international marketplace something like $120 a barrel, how much of that is from speculation of people who buy and sell oil contracts for future delivery that are not users of the oil, like an airline that would clearly have reason to want to lock in a fixed price for oil in the future as a hedge against that price of oil going up and up because they're going to use that oil as fuel in their airline. No, these are the ones that are merely flipping, like hamburgers, the contracts over and over, which has a tendency to raise the price of oil. The price of a barrel of oil, as it rises, then clearly is going to affect the price that we go into the gas pump and put in our gas tank. And so if we would just start using some common sense and approach these things and do it in a fair way, I think we could get along so much better, and the American people would feel so much better about their tax code. And so I want to thank the Senator for his presentation.
Thank you, sir. If you'd, my friend would just yield to me
Certainly.
for one more minute. A lot of people go out in this time of year and they buy new cars, trucks, and vans. Traditionally, the spring is when people really shop for for vehicles. You go back a couple of years, 2007, we sold 16 million cars, trucks, and vans in this country. 2009, as we'd fallen into the Great Recession, car sales, trucks fell to 9 million units, 9 million, from 16 million to 9 million in less than 24 months. That's changed now, and we're on our way. As we know, Sergio Marchionne was from the CEO of Chrysler Fiat was here yesterday and said they're on their way to just not record profits. They pay back much of the money that we invested in them as taxpayers. But people are starting to go out and buy vehicles again. The average life of a vehicle most people own in this country is 11 years, which is how old my Chrysler Town & Country minivan is. But this is a time when people are thinking about starting to trade in their vehicles or maybe buy something more energy efficient. Unlike 5 years ago, people can go into any Ford, Chrysler, GM dealership, and foreign labels as well, and buy vehicles that get 30, 35, 40 miles per gallon and more, and more. And we find that finally the availability of credit has come back. And I would say for people who have the ability, they're thinking about trading in, trading up, this is a great time to do it. Great vehicles, great quality, and much better fuel efficiency. That's part of the solution as well. So thank you.
And I want to thank the Senator for putting up the chart that showed the amount of acres that are under lease and the minuscule portion of those acres. This is domestic production. We all know that domestic production has shot up in the last 3 years considerably. Yet of that domestic production, there's still so much capacity that is already leased out there, and I use the example of the Gulf of Mexico. In the central and the western Gulf, there are 32 million acres under lease, and only 6 million acres of that 32 million are actually drilled and produced. And so there's ample opportunity for additional domestic energy production on top of the substantial increase of production that has occurred over the course of the last several years. So if we'd stop fighting about all this stuff, if we'd stop beating each other over the head politically with this stuff and really get serious. You remember, Senator Carper, when you and I were young congressmen, we had a good example of leadership. We had Tip O'Neill, the Speaker, in the House, and we had Bob Michael, the head, the Republican leader. And the two of them, they'd get into their fights, but they were personal friends, so that at the end of the day, when it was time to stop talking and get together and build consensus to get the workable solution, they could do it. We need that kind of model operating in Washington, D.C. and state capitals around the country. And so I thank the Senator for his presentation. Madam President, I came to the floor today because I want to congratulate a Floridian, Rosemary Armstrong, along with her husband, Sandy Weinberg. I want to congratulate Rosemary because she's been such a longtime advocate of pro bono legal work in our state. She is a marvelous lawyer, a graduate of Columbia, and why she is to be congratulated at this point is that she has received the 2012 Tobias Simon Pro Bono Service Award. It is the highest honor in the state of Florida, Florida Bar, for pro bono legal work in our state. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the Tobias Simon Award, and it was named after the well-known civil rights attorney in Florida. And the award honors the work of private lawyers for 30 years now who provide free, voluntary legal services to the poor. And over the past 25 years, Rosemary has used time, she's used her talent to provide those pro bono legal services. She's volunteered with the Tampa Bay Area Legal Services Volunteer Lawyers Program since 1986. She has donated 1,200 pro bono hours directly to serve those in need. She was elected to the Bay Area Legal Services Board, and she served as a board member for 22 years. And she has served as president of that board for 3 years. And Rosemary has handled so many cases in so many areas of the law, including elder law, housing, and juvenile dependency cases. And of particular note is the significance of her work with victims of domestic violence. Rosemary was recognized last year for her work with the Florida Bar's President's Pro Bono Service Award. And this award is further recognition of her commitment and dedication to making sure everyone is well represented when they have to go through the legal process. She's supported by her family. She's supported by her husband, her fellow lawyer, Sandy Weinberg. And so, again, congratulations, Rosemary Armstrong, for receiving the Tobias Simon Pro Bono Service Award. Madam President, I yield the floor, and I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
Mr. Akaka. A quick update on some of what's happened in the Senate today. The chamber did not get the 60 votes needed to advance legislation that would use billions of dollars in savings generated from eliminating certain oil and gas tax incentives. They would pay for an extension of renewable energy tax credits and incentives. And a 90-day extension of surface transportation programs is on its way to President Obama this afternoon after both the House and the Senate approved the measure. This extension averts a Saturday night shutdown that would have furloughed 3,500 federal workers and put 130,000 federal highway projects at risk. Congressional Quarterly reports that House Republican leaders expressed confidence that they'll be able to move a longer-term measure after the coming two-week recess. They said they need more time to round up support for their 5-year package. The Senate has already passed a 2-year highway bill.
Lucy Stein and Sarah Newman of my staff.
Sir, we're in a quorum call.
Granted, oh, I'm sorry. That's it. Proceedings in the quorum.